Brother Porter would leave the bottle at the podium. My brothers, unlike Brother Ben, my promise to you will be as was the recent promise of Kim Kardashian to her most recent husband. I won't keep you long. My brothers, whose very presence in this august assembly here tonight brings an unparalleled spirit of kinship, fellowship, and friendship that is essential to my soul. Therefore, I greet you in the name of 4 men who, in the blackness of a murky, miserable, rainy Friday night, a night chilled by the emptying of somber yet ominous clouds that dampened the ground all around the science hall, while the inner sanctum of their meeting place remained buoyant and dry. The darkness and dampness that hovered over the nation's capital that evening gave reason for most of the city's residents to sound retreat from the blanket of blackness. The slick streets, the howling wind, and the piercing cold, but 4 men that same evening took a match and lit a lamp to light that darkness, summons 4 succeeding generations of men to keep that lamp aflame, to keep that wick neatly trimmed, to keep the oil ever flowing, to keep the flame brightly ablaze, and to keep their fire ever burning. 4 men. Not one yet having reached his 30th birthday, but who put to good use the energy and enthusiasm of their youth to establish a firm foundation. 4 men, tender in years, but prodigious in preparation for their professional pursuits, and one incisive guy who himself had not long been shaving, but whose name all learned people of color would soon come to know. They did not let their neophyte status hold them back, hinder them, nor hamper their desire to plant an idea. 4 men, each holding up a pillar that had been fittingly placed in the wet cement of their hopeful thinking. But they were each firm in their belief that if they held his pillar long enough through that rainy night, the footer would harden. Each pillar would stand alone and stand erect and forever reach toward the sky. They felt that then they could chisel at the base the name of each pillar, naming one manhood, naming another scholarship, naming a third perseverance, and naming the last uplift. 4 men who knew well both the bleakness and blackness of that Friday evening context. They knew the frightening plight of a people, their people, less than 2 generations set free from the indignity of involuntary solitude. They knew the freedom denied by entrenched black codes and delayed by jaundiced Jim Crow legislation that stained the pages of Southern state statutes, brought with it the stench of foul odor in a nation that seemed sweet liberty. They knew the frustration of opening the pages of the Baltimore African American and the Chicago Defender and the Pittsburgh Courier others are still being made strange fruit as they dangled from a rope tossed high in a tree. They knew the inclement atmospheric conditions that made the night of their coming together socially dreary, economically dismal, politically dispiriting, and spiritually depressing. But one named Just was both intrigued and enamored by the audacious assertiveness and marvelous militancy exhibited by those who just 2 years earlier had laid the foundation for a national association for the advancement of colored people, where black men stood boldly and proudly as men. His sense was that lightning could indeed strike twice in a similar place. One named Coleman, a voracious consumer of contemporary literature, had just given fresh reading to a book that only a handful of years earlier was released by an Atlanta University professor that placed an additional burden on his shoulders as a member of the talented 10th. One named Cooper, at the time an aspiring physician, had been infused with the notion from his reading of his textbooks on anatomy and physiology that it is more than just a whimsical political proposition that all men are created equal. One named Love, who on the Sunday past had heard a sermon on perseverance, where he was brought face to face with the pen of the Apostle Paul, who said to a people about ready to give up, "We are troubled on every side, but not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Cast down, but not destroyed." All seemed in accord in their belief that the exemplary intent of the experiment 5 years earlier in 1906 that happened at the campus of Cornell University in New York sought only to affirm the social degradation already inflicted upon the masses of people of color and perpetuated social distinctions clearly based on color and class. The trajectory of their fraternal ascendancy seemed to pivot on the notion that yellow-black was better than brown-black, and that brown-black was better than black-black, and that black-black was better than blue-black. All our founders seem to agree that the measure of a man is not in the color of his skin, nor the social class of his parents, but that the service that one renders on this earth is the rent one pays for the space that he occupies in this life. All seem to be in consensus that the noble intent of the happenings earlier that same year at Indiana University missed the point, and that it is not the stick in your hand that makes you a man, but rather it is the stability and straightness of one's spine, there you go, the steadiness of one's study habits, the stick-to-itiveness of one's commitment, and the extension of a helping hand to pull up a person who's climbing up the ladder behind you. And focused on the pillars that reach toward the stars, and in unison declare our astra per astra to the stars with perseverance. 100 years ago tonight,